Hello and welcome to Runny Programs. Today we're going to start off by doing a little bit of refactoring work on the code we worked on last time. We will get into some feature work, but I think it's important to clean up the code before we continue to extend it. So the first thing that I've noticed about our code so far is that the app has a few more responsibilities than it probably should. And in particular, I don't necessarily like that the app is keeping track of what view we're in and knowing information about the keyboard. So this is something that I want to rethink design-wise. And the way that I was thinking about approaching this is allowing each component to listen to the keyboard so that the app doesn't have that responsibility of doing it. That being said, right now we just have a keyboard listener component, and this isn't exactly the most friendly or reusable component that we have in our toolbox, or that we could conceive of. And the reason for that is that if each component uses the keyboard listener, each component needs to know how the keys map up to buttons. So I think what would be better is to not have a keyboard listener, but to create a layer of abstraction and create a controller listener that will allow a component to say, for example, when the A button is pressed, do this. I think that this level of abstraction is going to help us moving forward, so that's the first place I want to start. So we're going to create a new component called controller listener. By the way, the benefit of this refactor is we'll be getting this code out of the app. We put it here just for convenience sake, but let's go ahead and figure out what this controller listener would look like. So we can probably keep the keyboard listener in the same file, since the controller listener for the time being is the only thing that's going to use this. So once again, it is hard to talk and code at the same time, but I'm doing my best, getting some practice at it. So cool, we have a controller listener. Let's not worry about the props for now. And what's that going to do? Well, that's going to render a keyboard listener and its children, the children that it's passed. And how is it going to handle the key down? Well, we're going to figure that out in a second. But we need to, first we need to connect the callback. So on key down, we're going to handle the key down. Great, and we're just not going to do anything with that yet. Import use effect. Great, so our controller listener right now does nothing. It just renders the keyboard listener. But what we want it to do is have a different API that's a little bit more friendly to use. So just kind of off the top of my head, what I'm thinking is something like on a press, and this is just going to be a function that will fire when the A button is pressed. So components can basically use this listener and say, hey, when the A button is pressed, I'm going to run this action. So similarly, we might have like on B press, and then that will also allow us to do things like on B release. We could do something like on button press, on button release, but right now I'm going to prefer to be explicit. And we can generalize if we need to. I think this might actually be an easier to use API in the long run, even though there's a bunch of different props you can pass. It avoids having if statements and switch cases inside of the callbacks that you're actually passing in. You can just have on A press, on B press, and handle them differently, easier to debug. It'll be a good time. So let's see. So this on handle key down, this is a keyboard event handler. And what do we want to do? Well, we actually have a little bit of code here that handles the A button. So if the key is Z, then that's our way of saying, the Z key corresponds to the A button. So when the Z key is down, the A button is pressed. So if the event key is Z, and that's on the key down listener, then we're going to call on A press. So right now, I have the test running just so that when we haven't actually changed our code yet. We've just written this new controller listener component. But at this point, we're going to start actually refactoring the existing code. And we've got our test here just to make sure that everything's still working as expected. Okay, so now instead of rendering our keyboard listener, we're going to render a controller listener. And it's not on key down we want, it's on A press. And what are we going to do on A press? Well, we're going to handle A press. And this is no longer a keyboard handler event. This is just a function, a callback with no arguments. And we actually don't need this if block because we know this code is only going to run when the A key is pressed. So we can just delete that if block. Okay, we're saving, and we should, okay, great, all our tests are passing. So we have now created this controller listener. I think this is a little bit easier to use API, and as we pull this into components, I think you'll see that it's a little bit nicer. We don't have to worry about mapping the key to the button in a bunch of different places. So this is great, and we don't have any of that listener code in the app anymore, so we've separated that out. That's good. Cool. First part of the refactor done. So the next thing I want to talk about is how the app is handling the A press. So I don't love this. I think what would be better is if each component handled the different button presses and delegated higher level, like a higher level API for the app to use. And so just to give you an example, it would be cool if the start screen component listened to the controller, and when the A button was pressed, fired a callback on start. And then the app could know, okay, the game is starting, what do I do now? Rather than the app worrying about, oh, the A button is pressed, so now I have to do this. No. That's too low level of detail for the app to know. The app just needs to know that the game has started. And so we're at sort of a little bit of a pickle here, because what we want to do is do something like from the app pass a callback into start screen, but there's this view outlet separating the app from the start screen component. And so we're kind of realizing that maybe this structure isn't necessarily the best for the app. And as I start to restructure, maybe this will make more sense, but as it stands, I don't think this is the right structure. So we're going to do a pretty cheeky refactoring right here. In order to allow the app to directly pass props into start screen, and you'll see an example of that in a second, we're actually just going to move it to be within the app. And this is only temporary. So don't get too nervous about this. This is just to help us refactor in a way that keeps the test passing. So this is a cool little trick if you're trying to factor out a component like the view outlet. Just drag it into the parent component, and you can kind of tweeze it until you don't need the component anymore. Okay, so just taking a sec to think. Okay, so what we want to do is have the start screen component listen for its own events. So let's jump into start screen, and we're going to render a controller listener, which we need to import, of course. And we're going to create this handle A press callback. And what's going to happen on A press? Well, our start screen component I mentioned could have an API like on start, and this is a much more high level API than that the app can use. So the start screen can now handle the interactions with the controller. The app can just worry about, oh, okay, the game is starting, now what do I do? So I hope that makes sense, and I hope when you kind of see the direction we take the app component, you'll start to see why I think this is a bit of a better design. So this is pretty simple. When the A button is pressed, we just want to fire the onStart handler. Now back, we'll see our test fail because we're sort of refactoring unsafely, but we're going to get back to passing tests pretty soon. So now we have this onStart API, and we can create a new method, handle handle start. How do we handle the start? Well, we just set the current view to the main menu and pass that in. So at this point, our test should be passing, and you might be thinking, well, aren't two callbacks getting fired? Like this one's getting, this is still getting fired, so it's setting the current view, and this is getting fired, so it's setting the current view. So that's fine. Like we're still keeping our tests in the green. Now I should be able to safely delete this part of the switch case, and we should still see passing tests, which means that we've hooked up our start screen successfully to the controller listener, and the app doesn't have to worry about that specific button press anymore. So let's go ahead and stage. We're going to do the same thing with the main menu. So the main menu, let's try to refactor this safely this time so that we stay passing tests. I try to do that, but sometimes like if the changes are going to be really small and I'm confident we'll get back into green pretty quickly, I'll make some unsafe refactors. But the first thing I want to do is I want to pass a I want to think about the API for the main menu. So the main menu just has one option right now, which is new game. So let's make an API callback on new game, and the app is going to handle new game. Cool. Nope, don't want to do that. And the test should still pass if I do this. It might get a TypeScript error. Okay, good. Tester's still passing. We still get the error, so let's jump into here. And we want to add a new prop on new game. So the error's gone away. Our tester's still passing. We're looking good. Okay, so when this handle new game is called, we'll do something similar to what we did here. If we're in the main menu, or rather, just the app just knows now when a new game is started, we set the current view to new game. So again, safe refactors, we're going to do this. This callback isn't actually getting fired yet because we haven't added a controller listener. So let's go ahead and do that in here. Create a controller listener, and on a press is going to handle a press. We could just pass on new game. I do like to separate these out into their own functions so that if we for some reason need to do anything more complicated, or like if, not that we do it here, but if there's like analytics or something like that, we don't have to go ahead and create this function. We're doing it kind of for the future developer. I mean, you could argue it's more code when there doesn't need to be. I think it's good just to keep in the habit too. I have an on callback, and I create a handle, the handle equivalent, and then I do whatever I need to do, whether that's calling, the provided callback or doing something else. Cool. So at this point, our next refactor step. So this is where it could get dangerous. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this line, and our test should still pass. If they don't, I'll revert, and we have passing tests again. But our tests are still passing. That's great. That means that we don't need this anymore. Which also means we shouldn't need the controller listener anymore. And now you kind of see the domino effect. We don't need the handle a press anymore. And because there's really nothing that the app is doing in the render part except rendering this component right here, we can make a nice chunky refactor, which we'll do safely actually. So let's change this to current view. Current view, that's redundant. Okay, we're still in the green. And now we should just be able to get rid of that. This line is no longer needed. Okay, great. And now you see, oh, let's even clean up that import. Great. And now you can see with just, a little bit of refactoring effort, what we've stripped our app down into. We just have an app that knows about the current view, and it knows how to handle high-level game actions, like when the game is started, and when a new game is, basically when the user selects the new game option. Just for fun, we can kind of, we can see we got rid of a lot of code. We didn't really add that many new lines. I think the app is a lot cleaner. Our controller listener, we can think about how to handle this later. I'm still not that worried about it. Main menu, pretty simple. Start screen, pretty simple. Okay, so is there anything else that I thought about? I think this is probably a good place to stop refactoring and start getting into the story development. So let's checkpoint here, and this is going to be refactor controller listener. Let's just call it. Okay, this is good. Now let's jump into what we're going to be doing for feature work today. So what you see here is the menu that allows a player to pick the name that they're going to use for the game. And so this kind of screen right here, this is what we're going to be replicating today. And by replicate, I'm using that very loosely. So I've written up a story for this, for choosing the player name. So we can look at the acceptance criteria. Let's go ahead and maybe we'll drag this over to the app so we can read it while we think about how we're going to test it. So let's get rid of that for a second. So when I hit the A button from Hello there, welcome to the world of Pokemon dialog, I see first, what is your name? And a menu with the following player names. So let's break this up. So when I hit the A button from this dialog, I see this other dialog. So we already have a test for the new game sequence, so let's just continue on this test. We'll make it like a true integration test. So this is us hitting the A key, and we need to we basically just want to check that this text is showing up. So here I'm going to use quotes just because the question mark is a special character in regex. I don't want to worry about escaping. I think in general for like get by text kind of queries, it's probably better to use strings. But then things like headings, buttons, as long as there's no weird characters, I think case insensitive regex is also a good way to go. Yeah, so hit the A button, we need to see this dialogue. So you'll notice actually if we go back to the story, I did give this a 5, and I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the complexity we'll be working with here. So the first thing to notice is that we're moving from one dialogue to another. So this is already something new for us. We really don't have a dialogue system, or we're basically just rendering a p tag, right? So we won't necessarily be creating this like dialogue sequence system, but we do have to keep in mind that we're changing the dialogue that's being shown. We don't really have an established pattern for that yet. So that's one bit of complexity. The bulk of the complexity is creating a menu. We kind of created a menu for the start screen, but really that was like a single button. There was no way to sort of go through the options and select one. So that's really going to be the bulk of complexity. And then you can even see once I've confirmed my selection, I see another dialog. So there's quite a bit here that we just don't have fleshed out. I did make a note that we're not even going to consider creating custom names right now. That's just way too much for one story. Yeah, I'm not looking forward to creating the whole like, choosing letter by letter, that kind of menu, whatever you want to call that, like the custom name menu. Okay, so we've got, anyways, that's enough talking about that. We've got a failing test because we haven't met the first part of our acceptance criteria. So let's go to the new game, and let me think about this just for a minute. So we have kind of a sequence of dialogues that we're going to be going through, and this is almost certainly not going to be the long-term plan. But what I'm thinking is that this component has access to, let's say, n dialogue messages, and we can basically just keep like a counter that when certain events happen, we update that counter. So so let's figure that out. So I don't even know if a counter would be sufficient. Let's try it, and if it doesn't work, we'll figure out something else. A lot of this development I'll be figuring out as we go. So if we struggle a little bit, that's okay. So what do we want to call this? Like the dialogue message index. Probably better to be explicit since we don't quite know. We're still playing around. We're still figuring this out. Let's create an array of dialogue messages. So dialogue messages, and this will be our first one. And so now in our component, what we want to do is render dialogue messages of the dialogue message index. Cool, so our tests are still passing except for kind of the new part we added. So we're in a good state. I'm gonna go ahead and stage that. Great, so remember that our new game, our components listen to their own controller events now. So, because we don't want the app to worry about that. So now we're going to create, or rather wrap this in a controller listener. And how do we advance the dialogue? Well, we're going to listen for the A button. So this is going to, we're going to create a little handle A press method. And what do we want to do when the A button is pressed here? Well, we want to increment the dialogue message index to be increment it one higher than it was. So let's just even go shorthand because it's pretty clear what's going on. I is a fine variable name, especially for a counter in a temporary inline function, I think. So great, so we've hit A, and now it's telling us, hey, I couldn't find first, what is your name? That's because we don't have a message for that yet. So let's go ahead and add that dialogue message. And do we see a passing test? Yes, we do. So now we have our our very makeshift dialogue sequencing pattern. If we want to add a new dialogue, we would just add it here. So let's our acceptance criteria are in our test. Let's go back to here, and we've done this part. So I see a dialogue, yes. Now and a menu with the following names to choose from. So not only do I see this dialog, but I'm going to see 3 options. And what options am I going to see? I'm going to see red, Ash, and Jack, the sort of preset names. So let's go ahead and do this part of the acceptance criteria. Again, TDD, just working in small stages. Write a little bit of test, write a little bit of code. Good times. Okay, so here we are in the new game. And I'm starting to think about what makes sense to pull into a separate component versus keeping it all here for right now. We could even still keep it in this file, but let's go ahead and start creating. So this is a little bit tricky. So right now we've got all the complexity of this like navigable menu, and then we've just got kind of the acceptance criteria part of like, I'm going to render something with these options. So yeah, let's do that. Let's take it high level. So I'm going to say that I have a menu component. It doesn't exist yet, but I have a menu. And I have some options I'm going to pass in. Why are you yelling at me? And we can even pull this out into a variable. These are going to be not custom, but default, pre-selected, we'll do pre-selected name option choices. Naming variables is hard. You know what? Let's not name it. Let's just go ahead and pass the options. So here I'm just thinking about what I want the API to look like. So there's a menu component. It's going to take a list of options. Each option I'm thinking is an object that takes something like maybe an ID so that it can be, uniquely identified. So, in this case, that might be something like ID just might be, what is it? Red. And a label. Again, we're going to focus on refactoring, but keeping it super simple. We're just we're still playing around, a little bit of copy paste magic. So let's say we've got this menu component, and we'll stub that out real quick. We'll say we have a menu. Okay, cool. And let's go ahead and just return something, stub, just so that our, and then we have to, of course, import it. Cool. So, yep, it's still saying, hey, I didn't find that option. That's fine because we're about to implement it. So I'm going to go ahead and stage because we're in, pretty good state. The rest of our tests are passing except for our new assertions. And we have a prop on this, right? We have a list of options. And maybe we'll create an interface menu options. And actually, maybe this would be better as a type. And this is just going to be a menu option. And a menu option is going to have an ID, and we can use something like a React key for that. Not only is it going to have an ID, it's going to have a label, which we could just make a React node rather than saying like it's a string or something like that. Let's just make it a React node so we can pass in whatever we want later on. Great. Now what we want to do is iterate over these options and render something for each one. So our menu, we can maybe just make like an unordered list, and for each option, whoops, there we go. Sometimes autocomplete is great, sometimes it trips you up, but that's fine. And we're going to render something like a menu item. We'll figure out what that looks like. Yeah, we'll render a menu item. Maybe we'll even pass the option.label as a child. Take advantage of children. That's that came out wrong. Whoops, I did not mean it like that. Of the children prop. So, oh god, that's embarrassing. Okay, anyways, so the menu item, we'll keep this super simple. All this is going to do is return like a fragment. Actually, maybe a list item. Let's do a list item. It's going to return its children, and just so React doesn't yell at us, we also need to pass this a key. We have a unique identifier, and okay, we're doing pretty good. So we have, it looks like we have the right HTML, but because I said this was going to be an option, and that's just because in my mind this is sort of the closest thing to like a menu. I took a look at the ARIA roles before this episode, and this is kind of the closest thing I could find. There's like menu and menu item, but I can't get them to play nicely with React testing library. I just don't think it picks them up because they're the menu, like I think menu and menu item are not even in the HTML5 spec yet for like semantic HTML. So we're going with option, and it's telling us, our linter is telling us we need an ARIA selected. We're going to go ahead and set that to false for now until we can figure out which menu item is selected. But great, we have a passing test, and I just kind of want to take a step into the browser just to show you what that looks like, because I think it's a little bit hard to visualize right now. Hitting the new game, and we've got this lovely, we even see a bug right now. So our tests were not written well enough. So we do see this dialog and this list of name options. Let's go ahead, and this is good. This is good to find. So it's like, it's funny because like we shouldn't need to check this everywhere to make sure this hasn't shown up yet. But I think just for now, let's go ahead and make sure that there's no options in the view. Get all by role option. We just don't want to have any options yet. To have length 0. This is going to fail, obviously, and we only want to show the menu. This menu right here for selecting a name when we've decided that a menu is visible. And so how do we decide if the menu is visible? Well, we'll probably need some kind of Boolean state. So maybe is menu visible, set is menu visible. So, whoops. So by default, it's not Boolean, but false. And we're only going to, so we can see our test failing, yep. We're only going to render this if the menu is visible. So this is going to cause the other part of our test to fail because now there's going to be no options. Oh, wait, I did make a small error. We need to do a query by because they should not exist. Okay, great. So now it's saying, hey, I found this first what is your name, but I don't see any options in the DOM. And that's because we just hit it. So now here is the tricky part. We just have like a very basic counter, to figure out to figure out which dialog message to show. This is not going to be pretty, but I'm just thinking about, keeping things, keeping the code changes simple, even if the logic, right, is like kind of complex or kind of, we're not easy with it, because we can always come back and refactor, right? That's the power of writing these tests, is we can write code that's not awesome and then figure out, okay, like what, why is it not awesome? How do I rethink the design of this code? So we can do something in here and say, when the A button is pressed, just wondering if there's a less bad way to do this. Really, really the problem is we just don't have a great dialogue system right now. It'd be great if when a dialogue was dismissed, we could run some code. Like when I dismiss the hello, that's actually not a bad idea. Something to think about, I think. Like when, for example, when this, like, we could kind of do something with like the menu options where this is, I'm not actually going to commit to this idea, but like maybe there's a label and then there's like an on dismiss. And that's, that's going to do something when we actually dismiss the dialogue. So let's try it. Let's try it just for fun, because I think this could have potential. So on dismiss, if we're going to do an on dismiss and set the menu visible, we'll actually need to pull this in. So let's, maybe we can, let's define it after our call. Yeah, because we'll have to anyways. Let's pull the dialog messages in and we'll save just to make sure our tests are still passing. Okay, yep, just the part that we expect to fail is failing. And yeah, let's try this label on dismiss. Something like this. There we go. And okay, cool. So now instead of just the dialog message, we want to access the label of the dialog message. And yeah, I can actually kind of see this going somewhere. So now what would be even better is if we didn't have, this is tricky. Actually, one thing I thought about, we might need to have this up here because this function is going to reference the dialog messages. Yeah. Just doing a little bit of thinking. We can actually stage what we have. Okay, let's just go with this for now. I think this is fine for now. Again, we can always come back and refactor. So when the A button is pressed, I want to for the dialog message, for the current dialog message, which we could even just make explicitly clear current dialog message. I want to call on dismiss. Now this won't do anything yet, but now in this in dismiss, so when I'm on the hello there, welcome to the world of Pokemon, Now I want to say that menu is visible. Awesome, passing tests. On it, like, I think this is not a bad first pass. There's a lot of thought to that needs to go into this dialogue system, but I think this is an okay first pass at it. Awesome. And now let's go back to our acceptance criteria. So we have a menu with names to choose from. That's great. Okay, now we're getting into some trickier territory. So there's a cursor indicating which option is currently selected. I'm able to scroll through the options by pressing up and down on the D-pad. I can press A to confirm my selection, and I see the dialog. Okay. A thought I had is that we should start thinking about writing tests for the menu component over the app. So let's jump into, I'm going to do a very gross copy paste just to kind of get us started here. We're going to write some tests for this menu component. So the first thing is that it selects the first option by default. That's the first test we're going to write. That when we render a menu, the first item is selected by default. So let's go ahead and render a menu with a set of options, and let's say those options are something like let's do like ID, foo, label, foo. Oh, is that all? Is it just ID and label? Okay, just an ID and label for now. Let's render maybe one more item. Something like bar. Those are great variable names, and even better strings. So we don't need this. There's a cursor indicating which option is currently selected. So to me, this translates as to we're rendering these options as like the role option, and we remember that the role option has whoops, this is the wrong file. Has an ARIA selected property. So if the option is currently selected, then that property needs to be true. And there's a way we can do that, tester that in React testing library, which is we can say screen.getByRole is an option with the name foo and selected true. And we expect that to be in the document. We can also say that the bar option should be not selected. So this will obviously fail because all options are set to false right now, right here. So let's stage that test. I'm just thinking about, shoot, yeah, this is going to be a pretty lengthy episode. I thought we'd be able to get through it faster. It was a 5-point story. Like I said, there's a lot of complexity here that we're kind of just teasing out, as we go. So we've got a menu item, and I think the most obvious thing is, what if we had like an is selected boolean, and we returned that, and we used that to set the is selected property. Now I'm just thinking about, yeah. So each option has an index, and we're going to keep track of the, what do we want to call this? Like I want to call it something like cursor. And the reason I want to call it cursor is because I'm thinking ahead to just a little bit to menus that are, I guess you could think of as like two-dimensional. So you can go left, right, or up and down, like the battle menu is a good example of that. In the Pokedex, I think it's like it's 4 options, but you can only go left to right. I guess that's a 1D menu, but I want to allow for there to be kind of like a concept of a row and a column, and a cursor will eventually contain that information. For now, we can just assume that the cursor is the row, and we can just use a number for that. So by default, we're just going to set that to 0. And the option is selected if the cursor is equal to the option being rendered. So let's go ahead and save that. Wonderful. We've got a test passing, and just for fun, I want to do a little bit of styling on this. So I think this will be cool. So if we do something like list style is selected, I guess initial, otherwise none. I'm not sure if initial is the best there, but what I'm doing here is saying if there's a if the item is selected, show the bullet point of the list item, otherwise don't. And so what that's going to do for us is in our app now, you can see there's a bullet point only next to the selected item, and you know, as we scroll through the items, the bullet point's going to move. It's going to be cool. So we've got our test passing. Let's save that. I'm able to scroll through the menu by pressing up and down on the D-pad. Okay, so our menu is going to be handling some key events as well. So let's go ahead and write this test. So let's say scrolls down through the list of options. We'll render those options again. We'll think about, you know, sort of cleaning it up later. And now I want to hit the arrow down. And what do I expect? I expect that bar is now selected. And then just to make sure we're not getting any kind of like, that we handle the edge cases, if I hit down again, I'm just going to keep bar selected. So back to sort of this list, if I go down to Ash, down to Jack, if I hit down again, I'm just going to stay there. I think that's like just a simple implementation for now. So let's save that. And okay, so right now it's saying the message doesn't give quite as much information as we want because it's not telling us this part about the selected being false. So it finds the foo right here, but it's selected true. So that's why the test is failing. The error message doesn't tell us quite as much as I'd like, but that's fine. So now in the menu, we're going to be listening to keyboard events. So again, this is kind of why I thought that the controller listener was much better than this keyboard listener, because this is a lot easier to reuse. And it occurs to me that we have not an on A press, but on down press that we have to implement. So let's go ahead and handle down press. This is good. On the controller listener, we want to create a new API on down press. And now maybe we can do something like switch event key. Well, hang on. First, let's just let's save as a sanity check. All the tests we expect to be passing are, yep, still passing, just this one failing. Let's switch on the event key, and case Z is on A press. We can figure out a way in the future maybe to, I don't like switch cases if I can help it. But good, tests are still in a good state. So now in the case of, I actually don't know what the event key is. So let's go ahead and log if we don't match anything, let's log it so I can see what it's called. Interesting. I thought we would see some output there. Oh, we haven't saved this file, so it doesn't even know. Oh, on a press is required. We might want to change that. Yeah, I don't think we should make this required. Awesome. We'll go back here and no more type errors. Let's save this. Now we should see the key code. So it's called arrow down. That's what it's called. When I have like more than like 3 files open, I start to like lose where I am. So we actually did need that file I just closed. So no longer the Z key, but the arrow down key, we're going to call on down press. Great. And so all we've done is now call that on down press from the controller listener, but here we haven't done anything with it yet. So when the down button is pressed, we want to set the cursor to be, we can do something like math.max. Off by 1 errors. Thinking about off by 1 errors. Well, here, let's just do C+1, and we should see that the other part of our test is failing now. So we get past one set of assertions, but now we're getting wrong test. Now we're getting stuck. Where is it? Is it here? Right, because now it's saying both are not selected. But we said that if you get to the last option and you hit down, it should just stay selected. So let's make this test pass. Instead of just blindly setting it to C+1, we'll set it to the minimum, not max. I almost did max earlier, of C+1 and options.length -1. Again, off by 1 errors. Yeah, this, don't get me wrong, this is not pretty. We'll find a way to improve it, but what's most important is we have the correct functionality that allows us to refactor safely. That's the true power of doing all this. So let's actually just real quick take a look at what that looks like, because I think that's fun. So I'm hitting the down key and I get to the last option. Yeah, that's kind of fun. So now we'll do the same thing for the up key. Scrolls up through the list of options, and now we're going to do arrow up. So here, maybe we could even do scrolls down and up through the list of options, because we're already scrolling down. We can do a keyboard up. Moving a little fast here just for time's sake, but so continuing on our test, when I hit the up key, I now expect the first option, foo, to be selected and bar to be not selected. Of course, our test fails because we haven't implemented it yet. We need a new button for our controller listener. So on up press. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say this is arrow up. Calling on up press. Cool. And now back to our menu. We want to handle that up press event. Handle up press. Up press sounds like a chest workout, or some kind of like, you know, like a bench pressy type thing, biceps maybe. Now we want to let's just do naively and say, you know, subtract 1 from the cursor. That makes the first part of our test pass. That's great. And then we want to check that if we hit up again, the foo option is still selected. It's going to fail. And now we can just make sure that this thing never gets below 0. And awesome. Is that the last part of our acceptance criteria? Oh, I can press the A button to confirm my selection. Okay, we are on the home stretch. This was a very long episode, I believe. So, confirm selection. Right now, the menu doesn't really have a notion of that. So let's say that there's an on select option that we have to pass. I'm going to say have to, because why would you render a menu item without having that? So let's say that that's required. And we need to handle one more event here, which is the A press. So I guess, like, from my perspective, this controller listener API feels like a lot easier to use than you know, thinking about like the keyboard and having to do that mapping, and you know, even if we created like a helper function, I feel like this is super explicit. When the A button is pressed, run this function. When the down button is pressed, run this function. Yes. I think right now this just feels like a good design. It could change. Like, we could find out, hey, this maybe wasn't the best design. But for now, I think it's fine. So what do we do when the A button is pressed? Well, we're going to get the, let's create a variable for this. Selected option. And what are we going to do with that? We're going to call the onSelect method of that option. So, oh, you know what? We almost we did something not so great. We didn't write a test first. Ooh, did not like that. So let's go ahead and write a test first. Yeah, we get some TypeScript errors, that's fine. So selects the current option, A button is pressed. So let's oh, you know what? Yeah, let's do this. So we'll create a mock function on select, and we'll just have it. No, let's split it up to make sure that the right one is called. So on foo select, on bar select, because we want to make sure one is called and one isn't. So this test, we're just going to hit the down arrow key and then hit A. Again, like, we've got this sort of bad thing going on where, you know, we know that this is the A button, or at least I know this is the A button. It's not clear to someone coming in, so we'll fix that up later. And what do we expect here? Well, we expect that the on foo select, we don't need these assertions, is called once. And we expect that the, oh, I'm sorry, on bar select is called once. and we expect on foo select not to have been called. All right, brain is getting a little bit tired, but that's okay. We're almost there. We're really almost there. So our test is failing. That's what we want. Now let's come back in here, correct our no of writing code before we write our tests. Our tests are passing. Great. You can see I was pretty eager just to wrap that up. So let's fix up any remaining syntax errors, maybe do a little refactoring. You know what we can do? We can pull this out like that, and a little before each. Render the menu with those options. We don't need this anymore. Make sure our tests are still passing. They are. Great. I've pressed the button. So now the last thing is we just want to see that dialog message that shows our name. Okay. Man, when I called this a 5-point story, I was not kidding around. Great. And we'll probably want to write a test for our app to make sure that this is all wired up correctly. But yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So this is the last bit of acceptance criteria. So I'm going to go ahead and, for example, select the name Ash. So arrow down, hit A, and what do I expect? I expect there to be the following text on the screen. I'll use regex because there's no weird characters in this one. Right, so your name is Ash. Do our little trick to lowercase. We expect that to be in the document. We can also just do a quick check to make sure that there's no more options by role, so that the menu disappears. That's what we just want the menu to go away. Option to have length 0. Okay, so just as a quick recap, we've got these set of options. We go down one, hit A, and we should see your name is your name is Ash, and the menu should not be there. So as always, this test is going to fail. Now we're even going to get complaints because onSelect isn't a function. So let's go ahead and fix that up. So onSelect, let's just create 3 anonymous functions for now. And can't read property label of undefined. What have we broken? It doesn't like something we've done. Oh, you know what? Okay, I think the problem here is that the A button is being pressed in the menu and it's selecting the option, but we're also handling an A press here to advance the dialog. The problem is we don't have another dialog. So let's add the next one, which is what is it? Write your name is player name. what is player name? Well, just because it's getting to be quite a long episode and we want to wrap this up, we'll create a player name state field. We need a non-dismiss, which we could just make that optional. Not going to worry about that for now. Awesome, so that's solving that problem. We can actually see, so it's saying write your name is blank. So now when I select one of these, let's do very short refactor. Name choices, because otherwise we're going to be duplicating this callback 3 times, and I don't like that idea. I've got some name choices, and let's even do name options. We'll map name to be an object with an ID of the name, a label of the name, and an onSelect of set player name to be the name. Now instead of passing this, we can pass name options. Okay, cool. So we get write your name is Ash. Oh, I forgot the so. So your name is Ash. Okay, cool. And the last part of our test, the menu is still visible. So when the what is your name dialog is dismissed, we'll just say set is menu visible to be false. Okay, we have TDD'd the heck out of ourselves. I'm pretty mentally tired after that, but no, it's fine. Like, that was a pretty, like I said, there's a lot of complexity here. Let's go ahead and jump into the app and see if everything is working as we expect it to. Our tests give us confidence, but let's just double check. So I hit A to start a new game. It says, hello there, welcome to the world of Pokemon. Hit A again. What is your name? Okay, now I am scrolling through the list of options. Whoa, look at that. How cool. How cool is that? And I'm going to choose the name Ash. And we have a bug. So this tells us that perhaps our test coverage is lacking in some way. Trying to think of what could be happening there. Right, so your name is blank. Okay, since this episode has been long enough, perhaps I will investigate offline, and to start the next episode, I'll figure out what that was. We'll catch that regression with a test. It'll be a good time. And yeah, if you made it this far, you are a trooper. I barely made it this far. So thanks for watching. I'll see y'all in the next episode.